Hey guys, what's up? Today I'll be doing an album review from the band Dreichmere with their full length from 2020 titled The Fruit of Barren Fields. This is a one-man project based out of Grand Rapids, Michigan, and is fronted by a person named Dustin Matthews. And describing Dreichmere's sound is quite a challenge in itself, being that it definitely brings to mind a lot of different musical elements to create one end product. Right away, and something a lot of people talked about, there's definitely a big, heavy, early, mid-90s Swedish influence, definitely bringing to mind bands like Opeth, early Catatonia, October Tide, that type of stuff. But there's also a lot more of this, I would use the word earthy to describe it. That makes me think of bands like Agalock. But that being said, while Dreichmere definitely has its influences, this is definitely, I think, an album that I would be doing a disservice to just to say it sounds like Opeth or it sounds like Agalock, because while yes, the influences are there, this is really a very, very unique record. This clocks in at, I think, around the 1 hour and 18-minute mark, somewhere around there, and it's 6 songs. And like I said, it's really hard to put into words what kind of music this is, but it's got, there are some progressive elements that are very upfront and center. So if that's your type of thing, I would definitely recommend checking this out, because at its heart, it's probably a progressive metal album. There's a lot of dissonance used throughout this record, especially near the B-side and towards the end, which I think is one of the things Dustin Matthews does really well, is utilizing the dissonance and how to make that musical, because I think that's something that's not always easy to do, and especially doing it in an extreme metal setting is something that needs a lot of thought and has to be very tasteful, and that's something this album does really well. There's a cool contrast that's kind of going on throughout the whole thing between beauty and dissonance, which I think matches the whole vibe of this album perfectly well, because this also brings to the table a whole lot of depressive elements, and there's also quite a heavy dose of black metal in this album. It's one of those things that it kind of all blends together to create more of an atmospheric effect rather than a genre-defining thing. But this album is definitely just absolutely breathtaking. I mean, once again, to draw parallels, it really brings to mind like the first 3 Opeth albums. Very, very epic, very, very grand, and just very, very depressive. The first song on here is definitely one I'd recommend checking out first. It's called Slitch. I believe I pronounced that right, yeah. And yeah, it's just a really great track, and it combines like all the factors I just talked about. You got dissonance, you also got really nice melodies. It starts off with this very atmospheric intro of like birds chirping, and it just sets the tone for this album. And you know, it's one of those bands and albums that definitely seems to be very inspired by nature and the natural world, and that's definitely something that really piqued my attention when I first listened to this. I think this sound, which is easy to draw parallels to other bands to, but is really hard to describe, I think this is pretty underappreciated and also pretty rare to come by actually in today's death metal scene. And this was put out on cassette through Life After Death, which I think is really, really great, because Life After Death is an awesome label. But if you look at the rest of the roster and the rest of the bands they're putting out, most of them do not have this sound, which I think is really cool. Why, or how they were able to do this cassette release, because this is one of my favorite styles of death metal. You know, I know a lot of people, you know, they call like that old Swedish melodic style doom, and you know, whatever you want to call it, like that sound I think is very rare to come by, especially now. And anytime I do, I just hold on to these albums for dear life, because man, the emotion that style, when someone can really hit it right, it's just a lot of emotion. And when I first heard this, I immediately ordered the tape, and I was so excited. And right after I got the tape, I was looking at it, I opened it up, and I wasn't paying attention. I had something else in my hand, and I went to bend over, and the cassette just took a shoulder height fall all the way on the ground. And by some miracle, it survived without a scratch and sounds really great. It plays fine, which is very thankful for that, because the production on here is another thing that I have to mention. It's very well done. Everything comes together really nice. The bass is audible, which is super helpful in this band's musical style of writing, because this is one of those things where the bass has a lot of interaction, especially with the drums. They're super locked in, and oftentimes the guitar is going to be playing some kind of melody or harmonies, and the bass and drums are going to be pummeling away at their own rhythms. For being a, I would say for being melodic, but really this album can be quite harsh and quite caustic. There's a lot of double bass and even some like blast beats going on. It's super aggressive at times, and it's one of those things that really takes you on quite a wild ride, because you just have these moments of really epic or sorrowful riffs, and then straight into these moments of extreme dissonance and even some speed. There's some like really fast parts on here. There's even a like a breakdown in I think it's Lamentations. It's a breakdown that's like totally based off the tritone, and it's just so dissonant. And it's so crushing, being that like it comes out of a section that's a little bit soft and a little bit pleasing. So Dreichmere is definitely one of those bands that stretches the spectrum in terms of heaviness, dissonance, and just super caustic sounds. And yeah, overall, it has a really good flow. The tracks, they go really well together. The second song on here, Wormy and Shroud, is another great one. And it's a song that showcases really good transitions between acoustic and electric sections, as well as there's some really nice whispered vocals that are very atmospheric in that song. The third song on here is As Golden Dust, and I think that is probably my favorite song on the album. It kind of reminds me of like To Bid You Farewell, being that it's got mostly acoustic guitars and tamer sections. There's also female sung vocals on that track, which go really, really nicely with the whole vibe of that track. And that's just another one of those really emotional and atmospheric sounds that is delivered really, really well. And overall, this is just a really killer release. If you're into that Swedish sound, that old school Swedish sound with a lot of melodies, but also aren't afraid to listen to a whole hell of a lot of dissonance, some really heavy parts, and a lot of atmospheric stuff, then I would definitely recommend checking out this album. I will say it does test your patience, though. It is not an easy album to listen to. Like I said, the runtime alone is 1 hour and 18 minutes, but it's one of those things that, going back to like a lot of the stuff coming out now, I really respect that, because to be honest, at this point, I've gotten quite a bit used to listening to albums that are under half an hour, and I think listening occasionally to a really, really long album is really good, because you can just really focus. You can let everything else in your life go and just let this atmosphere capture you in and take you away. And I really respect Dustin Matthews' determination, and is just, what's the word I'm looking for? I really respect him going all out in this album, because especially for one person to do by themselves is no easy feat whatsoever. And I just really respect how ambitious he's trying to be with this project, because this is an absolute beast of an album. I mean, the last song on here is 20 plus minutes, and it's 7 tracks, but it stretches this grand total of 1 hour plus, and is really just like a wild adventure through the untamed wilderness. That's what it feels like. Yeah. Also, the lyrics on here are phenomenal and very, very well done. There's a piano track on here called Delore, and it's an instrumental, but it's got like a poem that goes along with it, and I always love when bands do that because it's just one of those things, like this is a big piece of artwork, even outside of music, and to have like poetry in your album, even though it's not spoken but written, I think that's very powerful. And yeah, I just love that passage. I'll read some of my favorite lines from that. Were it better to have never known that a star once brightly shone and roamed perdition's forsaken garden beneath the moon alone. I left my heart on stone, traced in snow. In remembrance of her velvet voice, I would paint her epitaph across the sky. That last line, when I first read that, that just set such a vivid and perfect image in my mind. And you could totally analyze that like a poem. That is just such a strong metaphor, painting something in the sky. And it fits perfectly with the music. And I really have to give a lot of credit to this band for what they do. And also, it's really inspired me to start a solo project doing this style. I haven't done anything with it. It's just an idea in my head, but I already have a couple riffs written out, and yeah, it's basically really inspiring stuff and just absolutely awesome, atmospheric, death, black metal, progressive metal, whatever you want to call it. Super well, masterful craft. Dreichmere, the fruit of barren fields. I'm going to give this a 9.5 out of 10. Definitely check it out if you like any of the Swedish bands or Agalloch or stuff like that, because this band is going to take you for a ride for sure. So, Dreichmere, fruit of barren fields. Thanks for watching.